Hey guys, it's Venus here, and today I am going to be sharing how I prepare for a big game day. So it should hopefully be no big surprise that it's really months, weeks, years before the big event that the training occurs. So when I was training, obviously, for every match in my life in majors, the preparation was physical, but it was also mental. And my dad was a big proponent of visualization. So being able to visualize where you are should be something that you're doing on a daily basis, or at least a few times a week, to the point where it starts to become a habit, because it happens here first, right? And then hopefully this becomes so real that everything else starts to follow along. And I think people call this manifesting, and I just call it just setting goals. Folks, you don't have to manifest, you don't have to use big words, use that 4-letter word called GOAL. What is your goal? Write those down on paper. We've talked about this. Put it down on paper, and then from there start to evaluate, like, where are you going? Okay, so if you want to prepare for your big match, you have to have that endurance. You're going to have some things along the way that are probably going to discourage you or make you doubt yourself. All kinds of things, even people that you might meet along the way who are going to make you doubt yourself. I definitely met those kinds of people. I'm from Compton, California. I was never supposed to play Wimbledon. There are so many people who never thought I'd get there. But what's important is that you surround yourself with great people on a team who are going to help you get there and are going to support you. And if there are going to be people that, you might have to even compartmentalize. They may not believe in your dream. And you're going to have to calmly, quietly, and kindly correct them and say, hey, I'm sorry you don't believe in what I'm doing, but how about we don't talk about that anymore and focus on other parts of our friendship? And if they can't do that, then you're gonna have to move on from them. But make sure that the folks on your team are there supporting you. And you don't necessarily want people who are saying yes, 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 yes. You want people who are gonna be constructive and help you, but you don't necessarily want people who aren't going to do that. So endurance and also perseverance. Okay, so when I was preparing for my big matches, first of all, I started out with that goal, right? And then when I met things that stood in my way, whether it was injuries, whether it was I was in my own head with self-doubt, whether I, had to hear critics who said, oh, she can't do this, all kinds of things, right? That's when that perseverance kicks in. And if you're working hard, you're working on the right things, it really doesn't matter what anyone else says. And it doesn't even matter what you say. And you can also train your own mind to not say those things. So every moment that you're saying, oh my God, I don't know if I can, is a moment that you can say, oh my God, I can. So it depends on how you want to use your time. And if you start to train yourself every time you say can't, that you say can, your mind actually starts to train that way. It's just like when you go to the gym and you train those muscles, you aren't going to be in the gym 6 weeks later and not get stronger. You will. And so I think a lot of times we forget that we really can train our minds to think the way that we want to. So when you're preparing for that big game in life, when you're preparing for that big performance, remember to give yourself positive reinforcement. You have to be your biggest cheerleader. You've got to pat yourself on the back too. And it's also important to correct your mistakes along the way. So it's got to be a balance of both. You got to pat yourself on the back and correct your mistakes. If you're too hard on yourself, sometimes you can hold yourself back because you've just been so critical. But if you don't correct your mistakes along the way, you're never going to get there because you haven't corrected what's gone wrong. And trust me, things will go wrong, and there is nothing wrong with that. And I think if you've watched any sport game, whether it's a tennis match or a basketball match, if you watch the highlight reel, they show all the perfect plays. If you watch the whole game, everybody makes mistakes, even in the biggest final. And that's something I always reminded myself that, I can play a good match or a great match and still make some mistakes. Because sometimes some of us want to be perfectionists and we let those mistakes stop us or give us doubt or fear. But remember, mistakes can and will happen. But if you surround yourself with great people and a great team, hopefully some of those mistakes you can see and some of them you will make, but you can move on, you can recover from it. It's definitely not the end. Also, some practical tips. So far, we've been talking about setting goals. We've been talking about visualization. We've been talking about all these things like perseverance, but also you should take care of yourself physically. And I'm going to give you some suggestions that are so easy that it's a no-brainer. I'm not going to tell you you have to, become a perfect vegan right now. But physically, there are some things you can do to prepare Get sleep. So easy. Eat well, okay? You don't have to be perfect, but not loads and loads of sugar and loads of carbs and loads of processed food and loads of, maybe alcohol. Everything in moderation is fine. But when you treat your body well, the body and the mind work together. If you don't treat your body well, then your body is fighting and going in one direction, your mind is going in another. And at some point, there's going to be a crash. So you don't want that seesaw up and down with your body and your mind. You want to treat your body well, just as the way that you're treating your mind. So now we're going to kind of talk, more tennis terms. So let's say I was preparing for the Australian Open, and the Australian Open is in the beginning of the year, it's January. So one of the things that I do is I take a break. It's been a long year. Tennis is 10 months in the year, so I actually take a break and I give myself 6 weeks. So breaks are important. And I'm not saying stop at 5 o'clock. If you want to be great and successful, you might have to go past 5, but give yourself breaks so that way you can come back refreshed. And then from there, what I'll do is I start to make some goals. So what do I want to achieve in this next season? What do I want for myself, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of those things. So I set those goals. And then I give myself a timeline around those goals too. This is where I like to be in X, Y, whatever time period that I've set for myself. And then after that, I start to hopefully, and this is sometimes the hardest part, relentlessly pursue those goals even when it's scary. Okay, because on the court, a lot of times you just want that, short-term satisfaction of like winning that point today, making that shot today, not losing this practice match today. But sometimes if you are just winning for that day, then it's just that day, it's not for the long term. And especially if I've gone back to my comfort zone going and not working on the things that I'd like to work on. So what I do is make those goals, whatever it is in my game that I want to add new, or if it's technical. And then from there, what I do is just relentlessly pursue that, even if I have to make mistakes over and over and over until I get good at it. Because anything and everything takes practice, no matter what level you are, whether you're beginning or whether you're already there. If you're trying something new, it definitely takes practice. So once I've been working kind of through that long-term phase of these long-term goals, and it's the same thing with businesses too, they have long-term projections of what happens in that, that quarter, that month, that week. And as you get closer to milestones within those goals, then you start thinking about how do you prepare for that sooner. So once you get closer to the match, it's important to realize the work has already been done or the work hasn't been done, either way, right? So at that point, it's go time. And if you haven't done the work, then you haven't done the work. If you have done the work, then you have to trust that. You have to trust that you've done that work, and don't second guess yourself. Don't start to overthink. And here's this moment now where if you trained yourself in confidence, then allow yourself just to be confident, let go, and enjoy the moment. So what got me into the zone, to be honest, was just relaxing and not thinking too much. I would read a book or watch a movie because I felt like, okay, I've done the work now I just need to be relaxed. Anytime you're relaxed, you do amazing. Anytime you tighten up, it starts to get tougher to perform, right? I know other people like to pump themselves up and listen to music or even have someone give them a pep talk or something like that, or have some kind of coaching going into it. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but more than anything, you've got to bring confidence and allow yourself to shine, allow yourself to give your best. So you've got to really figure out what your personality type is. If you're kind of a calmer and zen person, you might do much better with a kind of calm and zen place. I'm a kind of very calm person, so I just like to be calm. But if I was a person that needed to be pumped up, maybe calm and zen would actually take the energy out of my sails. So for me, it was always about knowing what was best for me. And for you, it's going to be about knowing what's best for you in that moment. So once you get in the moment of your performance, whatever that might be, then you got to remember just to stay relaxed. Biggest match in the world, my dad would say, stay relaxed. And he emphasized that because when you're relaxed, you can achieve almost anything. So it's important to use some deep breathing if you need to. Remind yourself of your goals, remind yourself that you did your work, figure out what works for you in those moments. If you start to tense up, of what brings you back to kind of that base camp of realizing, hey, I'm good here. So the end game here is that sometimes just when we're right at the brink, and in tennis we call this closing out the match, you're right there, you're points away, you're serving for it, you can taste it. And sometimes that's when people start to falter a little bit. That's when they get the most afraid because they're so close. And the end game is exactly where you want to be. When you get to that final moment and you're almost there, you have to remind yourself, this is what I worked for. This is what I wanted. This is the position I wanted to be in. And remind yourself how much you love being there and how much you're enjoying this moment, even if the moment is tough and even if the moment is challenging. Because we don't remember the moments that were easy. We always remember those tough moments. And they eventually sometimes become funny stories. And hopefully stories where you learn something or you succeeded. It takes experience to learn how to close it out. And so if you fail the first time, the second time, take note of where you failed and try to fail in different ways if you can. If you're failing the same time, it means maybe you haven't learned from it, or maybe you're still getting skills in that area. So that's a moment for you to get more skills in that exact area so that way you can see it through. So now the preparations begin. And you've got all that you need. You know, you've got to endure, you got to be resilient, you got to persevere, you got to set those goals, and you got to have fun at the same time. And then when you get to that end game, you got to love it. And there's probably a few points that I missed, but guess what? You can rewind this. I hope you've learned something from this. And I think that I can share more too, maybe about those moments where I faltered, because those are super important stories and I learned a lot from it. It was the biggest learning lesson, even though it was painful. It was something that I unfortunately or fortunately needed to get to that next level. So maybe I'll share some of those, but you guys let me know what else you'd like to see too. And thank you so much. I hope that, my learnings will help you. So guys, I'll see you next time. Right? We'll see you next time. Right? Yeah.